Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Jeffrey Wheatman, the Vice President and Advisor Conference Chair at Gartner. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here.
Scott, it's my pleasure.
So, Jeff, we were talking a bit about the security tools that people are using and how a lot of the outcome that people were expecting came from tools at first, but now people are looking at what they're getting from the security tools and what they're getting out of cybersecurity these days. What kind of trends are you seeing around that?
So that's a great question, Scott. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been at Gartner almost 15 years, and we've seen a transition, a good one over the last number of years. 10 years, 12 years ago, the first question was always, what tools should we buy? And I think we have realized that buying tools is not the answer to all of our problems. We've spent billions, if not trillions of dollars buying security tools, different platforms, big ones, small ones, and yet we still see a lot of high profile attacks. We're seeing huge, significant breaches on a global scale. And over the last couple of years, we've seen a transition much to the good, which is that our clients are starting to think about how they have to balance the need to protect the business with the need to run the business. And there's an understanding that it's about not just buying tools, because tools are part of the solution, but it's about a balance between people, process, and tools. So not only do we need to buy tools, but we need to use them in the right way. We need to focus them on the right problems. And we need to understand our questions before we start answering. So it's not always about where can I buy, it's about how do we solve problems and how do we strike this balance and how do we decide how fast do we drive on the highway if the speed limit is 65? Do we drive 100 or do we drive 50? So it's about this balance. And finally, after many, many years, our clients are starting to recognize that that balance is the way to engage with the problem. We can't stop all risk. It's impossible. We can overinvest, but we shouldn't. We can underinvest, but we shouldn't. So it's about figuring out where the balance, and this is true whether you're in public sector, private sector, not-for-profit, higher education. Everybody has a quote unquote business to run. And there are risks associated with that. And we need to do a better job of managing.
I mean, it would seem like if you had a tool-based approach to security, you're almost putting a target on your back. You're saying, okay, this is what I use, go ahead and hack it. While if you're using something that's outcome-based, you're saying, okay, this is working, this isn't working, right?
Yeah, that is definitely true. And I won't name, but there have been several vendors in the past that have come out and said, we have an unhackable fill in the blank platform. And you're right, they are putting a target on their back. And let's face it, Scott, if attackers want to get in, they're gonna get in. They have way more time than we have. They have no ethical or moral boundaries or quandaries about what they do. And we as defenders need to be perfect based on that old model. And those attackers only need to find one missing link, one hole in the dragon's armor, and they're in. And once they're in, it's a free-for-all.
So when you're looking at this outcome-based solution, there's obviously a certain amount of risk. You talked about being on this highway, how fast you want to go. What is the appetite for risk? We've seen a lot of issues with cybersecurity, especially in the last few weeks. What are people willing to give up to have what they need?
Yeah, so I think that it's been an ongoing sort of evolution of those kinds of questions. I think for a long time, people viewed risk appetite as a number, right? We can't have more risk than X dollars, pounds, euros, whatever. But I think most of our client base, and this is true on a global scale, have realized that quantitative scoring is just not a super sustainable model. It doesn't scale really well. So it's really about taking a qualitative approach to where risk seeking or where risk averse and finding out where on the range we sit, and then building quantitative actions and metrics and measures to ensure that we get there. So in other words, if you have a very high appetite for risk, maybe you patch your systems in 60 days or 90 days. If you have a very low appetite for risk, maybe you patch in 7. And that's a discussion that we help clients have all the time. Once you figure out what those targets are, then instead of saying we patch in 19 days, we don't know if that's good or not. We know we targeted 7 and we're hitting that target, or we targeted 45 and we're hitting that target. So it's really about striking this balance and focusing on business benefits and business outcomes. The reality is if we take no risk, we have no business. We have no opportunity. You know, risk and opportunity are opposite sides of the same coin, essentially. And we need to start working with that as our driving sort of mode of engagement, rather than, you know, throwing all kinds of money at problems and essentially aiming for zero risk, which is just not achievable. And even if it was, it would be so expensive as to be a useless exercise.
So at this point, it seems like every day there's some sort of vital infrastructure, schools, gas lines, water treatment plants that are being hacked and held ransom for money by malicious actors. How can companies and public agencies and things like that work against these sorts of new attacks and new ways of really disrupting the whole public system?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we need to recognize is we can't stop the attackers. They're going to come after us, whether it's deliberate, whether it's direct, whether it's collateral damage, public, private, doesn't matter. That being said, we do know that there are people that are targeted out there. There are organizations, there are agencies that are targeted. So I think the first thing to understand is we can't prevent this. All we can do is build a program of readiness. And that's really about looking at training and education and awareness and making sure that less people click the bad links, less people open the attachments that they shouldn't. We need to do a better job on backups, and not just doing the backups, but testing them and making sure that we can recover. In a previous life or a previous role in my life, and obviously I can't share where I was, but yeah, we had great backups. And you know what? We try to do a restore and they failed 75% of the time. So yeah, we did backups, but we didn't test them. And then we also need to look at resiliency and continuity, because if we get hit, if we get targeted, and if we have a breach, and even if we pay the ransom or we don't pay the ransom, we still have to make sure that we have resiliency and continuity. And one of the things in ransomware that we're seeing is a shift. Historically, ransomware was they would take your data, they would encrypt it, and if you didn't pay them, you wouldn't get your data back. Well, if you had good backups, that was okay. But now they're stealing the data and then they're encrypting it. So now if you don't pay your ransom, not only do you not get your data back, but they release it to WikiLeaks or some other similar platform. And now we're starting to hear about another wave, which is they exfiltrate your data, they encrypt your data. If you don't pay, you don't get it back. Somebody else gets access to it. And now they go to your third-party connections. They go to your partners. They go to your vendors. They go to your customers and say, hey, your partner, they didn't do a good job and we stole data from them. And if you don't pay us, we're going to release it. So now we have this three-pronged sort of threat and risk vector, and it's just getting harder and harder and harder. And let's face it, ransomware is big business. It's state-sponsored. It's organized crime. The latest incident we just saw, they're thinking there might be $70 million worth of ransom paid. You know what? That's a reason for people to break into a business for sure. And ransomware is big business, and it's going to continue to get bigger.
So Gartner has a conference coming up where you're going to be addressing some of these issues. What are you expecting to see out of that conference? What are some of the big topics that you're hoping to cover during that time?
Yeah, so I'm super, super excited about chairing the event. This will be my 4th year. I am going to line up and give everyone hugs that comes in the door, because I really miss seeing our clients face to face. So we're hosting it in Orlando in September, and we have everything from strategic content, how to build a program, how to grow a program, how to mature your processes, all the way down to the tools that we should buy and sometimes the tools that we shouldn't buy. We're covering things like application security, cloud. We're covering areas, network. We're covering governance, risk, and compliance. So really, it's everything from strategic all the way down to tactical, covering data, application, cloud, all of the different facets of technologies. And we're really, really excited about the event. We have some really cool keynotes, which unfortunately we can't talk about just yet, but they will be worth the trip to Orlando. And after all, Orlando is the happiest place on earth. So everyone should come and join us.
Well, it'll definitely be warm at least. Jeffrey,
Yes,
it's
it
been
will.
such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Scott, and thanks for having me. Have a great day, everyone.
Our guest today was Jeffrey Wheatman. He's the Vice President and Advisor Conference Chair at Gartner. I'm your moderator, Scott Maucione. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Gartner.